Your uncle set me up. Said he had a couple runs to make. Couldn't do it. He was in the car with me. Talking about the taillight blown. Searched the car, find the dope, take me to jail. Come to find out the taillight wasn't blown. They set me to...
Now, in today's breakdown, we're going to be taking a look at all things Ghost and Kanan, and asking the question, was Kanan really the villain of Power, or was that actually Ghost? 50 Cent did do an interview a while ago back in 2016 where he said, Ghost probably has 11 bodies and I'm the bad guy. He's the one who sent me to jail. And this is a topic that we briefly raised before in a lot of discussions over the past couple of years, how Ghost was the original villain of Power. He may be a fan favourite, but we have to remember what we saw in Power was mostly through Ghost's point of view. Picture this, imagine you've never seen an episode of Power before. You start watching the Power universe by watching Raising Kanan first. You see how Kanan was brought up with all the influences around him, the environment that he grew up in, manipulation from snaps, pop, rock, lies and deceit that shaped his character. You then watch Power Origins, where potentially all Kanan ever did was be a big brother to Ghost, and like he said, be there for him, only to then set Kanan up to further his own ambition. You then watch Power, Power Book 2 Ghost, Force and Legacy in that particular order. Just imagine how different your viewpoint and perception would be on the entire storyline and on certain characters. When watching Power, would we then be saying Kanan was one of the bad guys? Or would we actually be saying, do you know what, Ghost actually deserved that shit? Ghost has always been a grimy character. Like Tommy once said to Tariq, you're just as grimy as your old man. Because don't get it twisted, fan favourite or not, Ghost was definitely a very grimy character at the same time, and I do think we will get to see some of that in Power Origins, which probably stems from a couple of factors: his upbringing, his family, his backstory, influences in the streets such as Kanan and Breeze themselves, Tasha also being one of them, and also his own vision and ambition. And that's the agenda for the rest of this particular breakdown. We're going to take a look at Ghost and Kanan's relationship from a different viewpoint, how watching Raising Kanan and Power Origins could actually be shifting our perceptions in terms of how we see the entire world of Power, and how it will continue to do so with Raising Kanan Season 5, along with Power Origins, especially when it comes to the relationship and perception between Kanan Stark and Ghost. Now, I do think first we do need to see this meeting between Ghost and Kanan and also Tommy. How do they meet? What's their first interaction? How do they basically come to know each other in the streets and become the brothers that we know they became? Because we know they are in and around Queens at this particular moment in time. We saw Tommy's graffiti spray painting on the boards of the shops that Rock purchased way back in Season 3. That was definitely a small Easter egg and a nod to Tommy being in and around Queens. So Ghost would definitely be as well, although at this particular time he would still be called James because we know Breeze was the one who actually gave him the nickname of Ghost. But how do they meet? I do think we're all waiting for that first interaction, which I personally don't see happening in Raising Kanan Season 5. I think there's way too much story to tell, there's a lot of unanswered questions and storylines that they need to get to and deal with. Maybe it's something that happens in an after-end credit scene or a teaser right at the end that teases Power Origins. That's something I can definitely see. Or even if it's just hearing them being stupid on the microphone in Lou's bar.
I like it, she love it. No hesitation, I had to push up on it. I like it, she love it. No hesitation.
You remember the rap I made up for you? I like it. She love it. No hesitation, I had to push it.
We don't necessarily need to see them. Maybe we just hear this in the background. It would be a cool little nod back to Power and a great Easter egg. But either way, however they do it, I do think we're all waiting for that first interaction in the same way we were all waiting for Breeze. How do they meet? Is there someone that introduces them like Snaps and Pop did with Breeze and then see them building this relationship that was definitely full of a lot of love, brotherhood, and trust?
That doesn't mean that Uncle G did it. Showing I was running shit than me. Kanan. Ghost and Tommy kept coming around talking about some shit I wasn't down with. So he got rid of me by sending me to prison.
Back in Power, when Ghost was going through a lot of trouble in the streets, when he was really facing some difficult problems, he seemed to want to turn to one man, Kanan. Regardless of whether he sent him to jail to further his own ambition in the streets, which again was a grimy move, Kanan was still his go-to. Whether it came to the Trenton beef or when it came to guiding him when his operation was being hit in Season 1, not knowing that it was Kanan behind the hits, there's a reason why Ghost decided to reach out to Kanan. Ghost still had a lot of love, trust, and respect for him, even more so than his wife Tasha or people like Roller, who tried to convince him that he was his friend, not Kanan.
It's Kanan, right? You and that crazy motherfucker still tight after all these years. Shit, you trust him more than anybody. Even Tommy. He's my friend. I'm your friend.
Now, back in Power, Ghost said that Tommy was on the Kanan Kool-Aid in conversation with Tasha in Season 2. but he was definitely on the same ship back in season 1. Kanan wasn't his friend, Roller was. But just like he said to Sean, he was there for him at a really crucial moment in his life, and that's something that always stuck with Ghost.
When my pops died, your dad was there for me, man. I looked up to Kanan. Hell, I needed him. At one point in my life, I loved your pops very much.
He wasn't just his former mentor or the OG in the game, he was his brother and someone that put his arm around his shoulder and helped him when his pops died. The person that he would have looked up to in the streets, which we're probably going to see a lot of in Power Origins, where Kanan mentored both young Ghost and Tommy, teaching them the game under Breeze, but definitely being more than that. Being more than just a mentor in the streets, he's going to be a big brother and a mentor that Ghost never really had.
Back then, Kanan kept us in line. Taught us the business, made us men. Ghost and I owe your father big.
Your pops brought me in the game, schooled me on everything. Make sure your word is your bond. Never turn your back on your friends.
He's a character who will help turn Ghost and Tommy from boys into men, which is normally the job of your pops, but as we know, Curtis St. Patrick died quite early on, and Tommy didn't even know Tony Teresi existed until Power. So naturally at a young age, just like we're seeing a young Kanan Stark, they would have looked to someone else, someone older to guide and influence them, and that's where Kanan and Breeze would have also stepped in. However, in Power, Ghost definitely leans on that loyalty when he was in trouble in season 1. He viewed Kanan as a resource from his past, which does also play on something that Omari Hardwick also teased way back in 2016 in the same interview with Vibe. He said the following on loyalty. Omari Hardwick's definition of loyalty would definitely be, if you've been down for me when it was really rough, if you checked on me when I was trying to figure out that terrain of that heavy ass mountain and how to get up, if not to the top, at least somewhat to a satisfactory place, then I'm rocking with you for life. Once you got me, you've got me. Whereas Ghost, his definition is definitely a bit more self-serving. So Ghost's definition of loyalty is a bit more self-serving, which I do agree and also disagree with. I do think at the beginning of Power, Ghost wasn't always a character who was just looking out for his own selfish gain or his own benefit, but as the series progressed, no doubt the loyalty did turn a bit more self-serving, that's for sure. And that is also the case when he orchestrated Kanan's downfall. Ghost sent Kanan to prison so he was able to take his position and level up in the drug game.
Back then, I had big plans. Big plans that Kanan couldn't see. So it was either set him up for him to go away or it was me killing him.
Ghost saw Kanan as most likely being in the way of his future, exactly like he saw Breeze. He was basically a barrier to his vision of scaling his operation and potentially the long-term vision of him potentially even going legit, which he probably knew Kanan would never have been down for. Whereas with Tommy, Ghost probably knew whatever he said, Tommy would go along with the plan, just like we saw in the early seasons of Power. Again, highlighting the fact Ghost's loyalty does become a little bit more self-serving. And let's not get it twisted, it was a very grimy move for someone that he loved, someone that he considered a brother, someone who he was still seeking guidance and assistance from, even after he sent him to prison, which in my opinion, Tasha played a very big role in.
Fucking Kanan.
Well, we wouldn't be talking about motherfucking Kanan if you killed him 10 years ago, like I told you to.
Now, I do think Tasha had a huge influence on Ghost when he was younger, because she wanted Ghost to originally kill Kanan. Whether it was because there was some history between Kanan and Tasha that Ghost never knew about, who knows, 50 Cent did tease it, whereas Corny Kemp has actually pushed back on that particular theory. Either way, whether they did or didn't, we will eventually find out, so only time will tell. One thing I do think we can say for almost certainty based on previous conversations and knowing how Tasha wanted Ghost to kill Kanan, how she also always believed and wanted him to continue being the biggest goddamn drug dealer in New York, is how Tasha would have probably been in Ghost's ear about how he was better than Kanan.
Because they're not you. They're not as good as you.
I have zero doubt in my mind that Tasha would have been telling Ghost he didn't need Kanan, he was better than he was, he had a vision that Kanan couldn't see, he had a bigger future that didn't involve Kanan, he was in the way of his future, very similar to how we once saw Holly do with Tommy back in Power. Tasha would have just amplified this vision and ambition that Ghost had and convinced him to get rid of Kanan because she wanted him to originally kill him and probably help fulfill his ambition and long-term vision in the streets. As we know, Ghost couldn't bring himself to kill Kanan, which would later come back to haunt him, which does actually prove Tasha was right, Ghost should have killed Kanan, and she was also right when it came to a lot of things. I do think Tasha does get a lot of unnecessary hate, because at the time she was the right person for Ghost in order to help him take that next step up of becoming the biggest drug dealer in New York, just like she said in Power. He wasn't rich and successful when they met. What they built together. She was the one who was studying accounting and also helped set up all of Ghost's legit accounts and kept on top of all the numbers. No doubt she helped Ghost elevate and reach the top. As I've said many times before, I do believe women are the backbone of most families. She's definitely no saint, don't get it twisted, no character is on power, and the problem with Tasha was she failed to adapt and evolve with Ghost within their relationship. When we got to power, Ghost then started to see a better life from them beyond the drug game, but Tasha didn't. She was still stuck in a younger mindset. She wanted him to continue being the biggest drug dealer in New York because she was slightly immature, which is something Courtney Kemp also echoed as well. She failed to see the bigger picture. But going back to the move that Tasha and Ghost put in motion, regardless of whether Kanan was involved in potentially Curtis St. Patrick's death and manipulation around Ghost killing Breeze as well, Ghost loved Kanan like a brother because he couldn't bring himself to kill him in the same way he was able to kill Breeze. But him and Tasha still sent him to prison, which would then allow him and Tommy to take over the drug business in New York at Kanan's expense. At Kanan's expense, they were able to build everything that they built, what we saw originally in Power, taking away the operation from someone who raised them and taught them how to hustle, made them men, turned them from boys to men. It really is a grimy move when you think about it. And there's also a reason why they didn't tell Tommy about their plan as well. They knew he would never have been down with it. Tommy only learned about the plan that Tasha and Ghost hatched much later down the line in Power. So it definitely was a very grimy move on their part from Tasha and Ghost, no doubt. Now, at the beginning of Power Origins, I do think we're going to see a very solid and good relationship between the two. As I mentioned before, Kanan was there for him when his pops died. It doesn't mean we won't see disagreements and fights, we probably will. We know how brothers are and how they can fight, and we also know how ambitious Ghost was and how we like to do things in a certain way. I'm sure we're going to see some of those certain traits come through in Power Origins, where at the beginning he's happy to hustle on the corners, he's got his crew underneath him, but ever so slowly as the series progresses, we know he's a character who's going to evolve and a character who would want to definitely be in control. Just like he always used to say back in Power, he's in control, I've got this. He loved being in control over every single situation, from controlling his family, his relationship with Tommy, his relationship with Angela, his street business to his legit business with Club Truth. This was a man who loved being in control, and we saw what he was like when he didn't have situations on lock. It's a trait that we will eventually see coming through in Power Origins, where he starts to see a different vision for the drug game compared to Kanan, and then moving him out the way just like he did with Breeze, because sending him to jail for 10 years allowed Ghost and Tommy to expand their operation, and as I said before, live like a king in a penthouse suite in Tribeca, build all of this at Kanan's expense. So as 50 Cent said, Ghost has done all this shit and I'm the bad guy, motherfucker sent me to jail. 50 Cent also did speak about the definition of power, and he said the following: well, power is influence. If we took everything, power would be influence, and that person that would be able to influence the most people would be the most powerful person at that particular point. Which plays along something I constantly mention during my breakdowns of different seasons of Power, in terms of how power does shift from player to player during a season of Power. If you guys remember, I said it in 4 Season 3, power will definitely shift, and this is definitely how. At some point in the story, Tasha would have been the most powerful person, because I do think she would have had a very big say in Ghost moving Kanan out the way, and at that moment in time, she would have had the power of influence. She would have been the most powerful person at that particular point, where she was able to influence Ghost into moving Kanan out the way. Same with Ghost, once he moved Kanan out the way, he would have had full power and influence over Tommy and their entire organization. Without Kanan out the way, Ghost wouldn't have been able to have control over Tommy in the way he did, until of course that changed around the Season 3 mark of Power. Now, Kanan was definitely labelled the bad guy because of his chess games that we saw him playing from prison, hitting Ghost's organization through pink sneakers. Kanan was labelled the bad guy because he was using psychological warfare, like corrupting Tariq to destroy Ghost from within. Kanan was the bad guy for teaching Tariq the game and introducing him to characters like Ray Ray and Jukebox. But the fact is, Ghost and Tasha were the ones who lied about who they were, and according to Tariq, the only person that was truthful to him was Kanan. With Tasha and Ghost, they were doing it to protect Tariq and give him a life that was different to their upbringing. We do have to raise that point, but the fact is, Ghost and Tasha were the ones who made that grimy move by setting Kanan up while Sean was in the car. Ghost then took Sean under his wing and robbed Kanan of all those years with his son, trying to make another clone of himself, just like Kanan said. He's always looking to make clones of himself. But with Ghost taking Sean under his wing, and later Kanan taking Tariq under his wing, it did kind of just end up being poetic justice in a way, with how Kanan was able to corrupt Tariq. You took away the time I had with my son, so I'm going to take yours. Kanan was labelled the bad guy because of his brutality, his chess games, corrupting Tariq, and some of what he did in Power, which definitely was uncalled for, by the way. This was one of them. But the way Ghost did it back in the day with strategically removing Kanan out the picture, the betrayal that started it all in Power, does definitely make him more insidious. And I do think Power Origins will reframe Ghost's character, maybe not born as a villain or born as a grimy character, but someone who was shaped by circumstances into turning into a grimy survivor because of his early influences and what he went through, which Kanan definitely would have played a part in as well. I do think one thing that would have let Kanan down was that sometimes he cared too much, just like Duke said in Raising Kanan Season 2.
Shit's the best part about you, Kanan. The part that cares. Don't ever lose that.
I do think Kanan cared way too much when it came to Ghost, just like he cared way too much when it came to Tariq, which is why he never saw the betrayal coming from both father and son. He didn't see it coming from both of them, not when Ghost and Tasha set him up, and not when history repeated itself in Power Season 5, when Tasha and Tariq did the same thing years later in Power, father like son, both as grimy as each other. But who was behind the move, as I mentioned before? Tasha, the one with the power and influence once again. However, at the same time, it's also because Kanan cared way too much. He didn't see it coming from someone that he cared about and loved like a brother. And also the same with Tariq, who he saw as a son he never had. Which I do think is the best place to wrap things up. I personally don't think Ghost was born a grimy character. I do think circumstances that he grew up in, what he went through shaped who he became, and also Tasha's influence. And Kanan definitely would have played a part in that as well, but still a very grimy move. And hopefully this is something we do see in Power Origins a bit later on down the line, so we are able to piece the entire puzzle together, which in turn may then probably give us the perspective where we do say, yeah, Ghost did deserve that shit back in Power. As I mentioned right at the beginning, picture this. If you were to watch the Power shows in order from Raising Kanan for the first time, I do think we could make a very good argument to say Ghost did deserve what he got, and maybe come the end of Power Origins, that's exactly what we may be thinking. With that being said, drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.